Welcome back to The Big Story, and it is the final day of submissions. The judges have now adjourned until Monday, when we will get the final verdict of this second Supreme petition that is challenging the re-election of President Uhuru Kenyatta in the repeat presidential poll on the 26th of October. Felix Owor now joins the panel. He's an electoral law expert and no stranger to us here at KTN News. So because Ndomgeni, we will give you the opportunity to speak first. We've been here with Dr. Duncan Ojwang. I will start with where we had at the beginning. The highlights for you for this case. Case is closed, if you like. What has stood out for you?
First of all, let me begin by apologizing for your viewers. To your viewers, I'm very sorry. Actually, I was caught up in very bad traffic. Not traffic, but the southern bypass was blocked.
Yes, right.
I think, but going to your question, I think it's a big occasion for us. And once again, this process, the long electioneering process, has served to test the efficacy of our democratic institutions and more so the Supreme Court. This is how the process that mature democracy walked through and evolved through. And this is how, countries, even in Africa, that are credited or that are regarded to be having very good or practicing very good democracy, of holding very credible elections, Ghana and South Africa, is a path that they have to walk, long electioneering period and things like that. I must admit that this Supreme Court, this presidential petition was not as widely watched as the first one, and I think for obvious reasons. But as usual, the Chief Justice presided over and managed his court very well, as he did last time, and so were the judges of the Supreme Court. I think it confirms a point or a fact that I've stated several times, that I think our judiciary have improved tremendously over time, and the safeguard to our democracy is actually credited by and large to the judiciary. Three things I think will be important or came out very strongly in terms of the issues that were canvassed. One, that the Supreme Court will be invited to make a determination, and I'm sure that they definitely will. The first one is a question that came from the 2013 judgment, and which has been fuzzy in terms of lack of clarity in its understanding, and that is the process of nomination.
What a fresh election means.
In fact, let's begin with that. What is a fresh election?
Right.
The distinction between Article 138, which is the first election, and a fresh election under Article 140, Sub-Article 3. It would be interesting for us to know or to hear what they are.
We might get some final settlement on this issue,
I hope we will get. And for me, if there is a singular issue, and as we know, it can go either way. It's at the discretion of the Supreme Court judges. But if there's a singular issue that may lead to the invalidation of the election, it might ultimately boil down to that one single question. What is a nomination? And was there a valid nomination to begin with?
So it's all about the interpretation also of the Supreme Court verdict on the 1st of September.
Correct, yes.
So did the IEBC and the chair properly interpret what the Supreme Court judges said in September the 1st?
Absolutely, and will they vacate that decision? Because connected to that is the second issue, which was the impact of Raila Odinga's withdrawal. What does it mean? And of course, both sides address themselves to that issue. And then the third issue, of course, would be the question of intimidation and violence, but connected to that, the extent to which it affected universal suffrage, and more precisely, the fact that elections was not held in some constituencies. I think this would be determinant. But I think both sides acquitted themselves well. The defense was more prepared, I must say, than tried to respond to the issues. I think in the first petition, they took
were
so many things.
of perhaps taking the process for granted a little bit and not preparing. But this time was a little different.
Yeah, it was a little different.
So we're entrenching electoral democracy through the judiciary. And we were discussing this just before the break, Dr. Is this the Constitution flexing its muscle, or is this a major point about our electoral system? What are your thoughts around this? I mean, it's a good thing this is what we envisaged in our constitution, that this is the process that we will go through, and that is fine. But to have this in 2 months, 2 presidential petitions, are we not able to acquit ourselves properly at the ballot? There is an argument out there that the Supreme Court should not even be handling presidential petitions, that this thing should be decided at the ballot box, and, you know, that's the end of that. What do you think? You rolled your eyes when I said that.
No, I didn't.
It must be very controversial.
I'm developing cross eyes. No, I think they are the custodians. There are some genuine areas that are gray. As the drafters gave us the Constitution, you know, it was a compromise document that had a lot, and like any other document that is a compromise document, there are some areas that could have either been drafted which are not clear or were left deliberately vague, and it's usually the court that come with clarity. But again, in overall, whether it is a good thing that we are relying on court, I think it is a good culture. It is constitutionalism. It is rule of law. And like we said, you'll rather have the 5-6 people in that esteemed chamber discussing it than us figuring it out, because otherwise it will go out of hand. But so I think it is a model for other countries. It is something to behold. But I also think court will at some point guard against abuse of process. It is possible that there could be politicization, that there is no political context or political controversy that does not end up being a legal controversy. Right. And that could be a problem if every political question end up being a legal issue, because but then that could be the product of the Constitution that is so wide that is telling court any issue that can apply law, you should apply law. Okay. So it is the design of the Constitution. Some courts have tried to dodge and come with doctrines like political question doctrine to say, you know, that issue is, according to our Constitution, better served by the executive or the legislature. But I think that still within our Constitution there is the element of separation of power. Okay. And the court have been courteous enough to say that we recognize there are other institutions, just like we are a creature of this Constitution, there are others. And therefore, as long as their decision is legal, yes, and reasonable, we are not going to change their decision for ours. Just because we don't agree that Jubilee should, that IBC should have done this. Right. Maybe this could be better. Maybe this make more sense. We can't simply be just changing our thinking for theirs, as long as they are abide with the law. So there's difference in that check and balances. Okay,
and yet, as you respond to that, how many cases did we have between the September 1st verdict and the October 26th repeat election, and then again this second Supreme petition? This is our democracy at work?
Well, I mean, it's true, and to a large extent is a question that that really bothers me. If you look at the number of questions that were taken to the judiciary at whatever level, the High Court, Court of Appeal, all the way up to the Supreme Court. From September 1st to now, they are not less than 10. Yeah. Some, as you remember, when this hearing began on Tuesday, were deferred to be determined.
So we're still going through the process.
Quite a number,
And in this country, legitimate political issues and questions are increasingly being left to the judiciary to deal with. It is a murky water. And we thank God that the judiciary, when called upon to adjudicate over these political questions, have to, by and large, acquitted themselves. Of course, there are challenges here and there, but it's a work in process. I think it would be so sad for the country to have one institution, and that is judiciary, develop itself way ahead of other institutions. Are we catching up? Is the Kenyan judiciary way ahead of us as opposed to other institutions? If you look at the way, political questions are settled in other countries, a number of things work and are at play. Strong institutions, like for example, if you look at a legitimate question would be, how did we find ourselves in this situation? Is the election management body, and that is the IEBC. And it's not just this IEBC. Election management remains the major democratic deficit in this country. It becomes an issue in every election. We reform Electoral Commission and come up with new commissions. Since 1992, the 2017 election was the 6th multi-party elections, and you'll be surprised. We've had 6 Electoral Commission in between. Chesoni Commission, the Kivitu Commission, the IPPG Commission, the IIEC, Amedizaka IEBC, that's the 5th one, and then Chebukati IEBC. 6 commission and 6 multi-party elections. We have fundamental problems in the manner that we manage our elections, and yes, we are in this situation because of the conduct of election management. Let's not transform that. But that is why, and of course our political parties. If you look at, we started with Ghana at the same time in terms of institutionalization of political parties. Ghana, as we speak, has developed and formed 2 strong political parties, the New Patriotic Party and the National Democratic Congress. I had a discussion with a former Secretary General who is a member of Parliament of the current ruling party, New NPP. And when he heard that politicians defect to other parties, he was shocked. He was like, if he was to defect to NDC, the first people who will deal with him with mistrust. No, first of all, mistrust and suspicion are the NDC leadership, the party that he has defected.
Why are you coming here? What's your agenda?
And they will say that because you could leave your party, then you don't have any firm ideological standing upon which we can accept you. That is how parties develop. So, and you can go on and look at the conduct of our police, the security sector reforms generally, and things like that. So what worries me is that whereas we've enjoyed peace and tranquility since independence, at a time when our neighbors were either embroiled in coup and military and counter coups and apartheid South Africa, Kenya was way ahead of a number of countries in the region. But Yvonne, countries in Africa, and especially sub-Saharan Africa, that are less tribalized, that are endowed with resources, minerals, oil, diamond, and things, Angola, Tanzania here, Botswana, etc., are actually fixing their governance problems when we are dealing with elections. And these are countries that don't have ethnicity.
So, Dr. is this then a good moment for us to seriously re-examine our electoral process? You know, like I asked in the beginning, is this an indictment on our electoral management and thus our democracy? I mean, it's all well and good, say, for 2007. And of course, we know we've had political clashes, you know, Likoni, Molo, every time, you know, associated with an election. But say for those incidents, you know, we've been, you know, largely peaceful. But is there something inherently wrong with our democratic processes that we now perhaps take this opportunity to audit?
Probably, just to add on what Felix is saying, it's almost like every election we barely scrap through. That was close, but we finally almost. And so one, I think that it shows that the players trust judiciary more than other institutions. With all its problem, there's a little more trust and independence in the judiciary. But then the issue is we turn everything to a technical legal issue, throw it to legal technicians, let them decide.
So let me ask you this. Is every political question a legal question?
It could be if you find, if you want to make it a legal question, but that's the problem, that we turn every technical issue to a technical legal issue and leave it to legal technicians. Those lawyers, the judges, are legal technicians. Felix is a legal technician. And so it is over judicialization of politics. It is over stretching law, and it is dangerous for court, because every time court get involved, they should be arbiters, but every time they get involved in issues that are so divisive, they lose something. To be honest, they lose something. And so eventually, you know, we say sovereignty belongs to the people.
Yeah.
It is possible for them also to, it is like depositing money in the bank and your trust. And every time you get into controversial things, one way or the other, you are also left a little bit hurt in terms of your credibility, your visibility, and the rest. So even to follow law is a moral question. Because we can have law, but if I'm immoral, I will decide not to follow the law. Yeah. So we think that law is all we need. But really we need values and morality, because even the choice to follow law is a moral issue.
Okay.
Yes.
This is getting now very fascinating.
Let me just one comment.
Yes.
That we are confronted by with the political issue that has the possibility, and usually becomes a constitutional question, and often has been resolved by the judiciary. But it should be apparent to everyone in this country, given the experience that we've had with the elections and the nullification of the August 8th election, that the judiciary or a judicial mechanism is not the only solution. Right. That the judiciary in August, in their judgment of September 1st, directed the IEBC to hold an elections, for example, in a strict conformity with the Constitution.
Right.
And the country, by and large, celebrated largely. We thought that for the first time, there was an institution that had the courage to be able to stand up to impunity, illegalities, etc., and the rule of law that was not hitherto known to our country. But the question then is, given the experience between when that judgment was delivered and the 26th, when we held the fresh presidential elections, and every other election since 1992, it should be apparent to everybody in this country that we need deeper conversation and dialogue to be able to fix our electoral process and electoral system once and for all.
Right.
Even if that takes another invalidation, so be it. I've heard people say that, oh, we are tired, the country is fatigued, that we've had a long electioneering period, that we should move on and restore our economy. This is the same arguments and excuses we've had since 1992, or if you may, since independence. And we have an ample opportunity to fix our electoral system. If we don't get it right, remember what I said, other countries are having their acts in order. Countries are fixing their governance problems. Angola, for example, is twice the size of Kenya with gold, diamond, etc. Yes. Once they get it right, and
they will be unstoppable.
They'll be unstoppable.
And
so, yes.
Maybe I could just add, because you had asked, is it a time for a bigger conversation? Absolutely, because what we are seeing as failure in Africa is not democracy, but liberal democracy. Liberal democracy is the one that emphasizes competition. Election is competition. And so a lot of other issues, I think third issue, are emerging around this concept of liberal democracy, whether it is too severe, where if I don't get the coveted prize, then it is almost a zero-sum game. And then those are conversations that other countries are having, because, you know, we come from a culture which probably don't overemphasize individualism. We are communitarian. And therefore, the concept, the liberal democracy, I mean, you'll be chastised by donors if you don't compete. Because to them, competition, election is about competition. And if you could sit and agree, then that is not competition. That's not democracy. That's not democracy. Compete.
Interesting. We have a minute each. And I'll start with you, Daktari. Just where do we go from here? Regardless of what the outcome will be, or either scenario on Monday, where do we go from here?
I wish Kenyans, my countrymen, well. I think that we have managed each other's expectation. I'm seeing people have managed the expectation better. We don't know what the verdict will be, but we also know that judgment, there's a reason why somebody is a judge. A judge. And so the purposive, the historical, the context, what is going on, what is available. There is no way that this law, constitution could simply be positivist, that this is what, you have to look at the general context. Where we go, I think that we will remain with our politics. And we will have rid of the legal process that we were actually pushing our politics within the law. Even if legal process ends, you'll just see politics as usual. And then court might even be tempted to say, please just politics there. Don't extend it anymore. We have tried for you. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Daktari. Felix?
We are dealing with a more enlightened electorate. You will be surprised that since October 26th, certain realities have come in our political context and political environment. And if you look at, for example, these proceedings, one of the issues that kept on being repeated during the first petition was the question of, we have the numbers. October 26th deconstructed that. And we are dealing with a citizenry from Coast Province to Western to everybody that knows that Kumbi, we actually have the numbers, but we've been marginalized and excluded, and there has been a lot of electoral fraud in this country. There is an enlightened citizens that are now more aware of that fact than before. We have a unique opportunity to strengthen and consolidate our electoral democracy. This process, regardless of the outcome, we must understand that it is not just a legal or judicial issue. The country must confront this monster of electoral fraud and electoral malpractice once and for all. And if we are to compete with our neighbors who are actually fixing and getting their acts in order, then we have no choice but to confront electoral fraud in this country and deal with it once and for all.
Thank you very much. Felix Owori is an electoral law expert. Dr. Duncan Ojwang, who's Dean of the Law School at the Nazarene University. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for making the time to be with us on this last day of the hearings at the Supreme Court petition. All eyes now on the Supreme Court judges, the 6 of them, who have promised to give us a verdict within the constitutional timelines. That is on Monday. Thank you for watching The Big Story tonight. Our coverage and analysis of this continues on KTN Prime. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. Good night.